Why has it all gone so wrong?
Hello, is that Mr. O'Brien on the line?
Loud and clear, Jacob.
What a pleasure to be joining your programme. I'm normally with Mr. Ferrari, whose views I think are slightly sounder, but it's nice to have a chance to come on and talk to you.
Better late than never. So why has it all gone so wrong?
Why has what gone wrong?
Brexit, Jacob.
Well, Brexit hasn't yet happened, so why are you saying it's gone wrong before it's happened?
Oh, this is going to be fun. So how have we ended up where we are now? You'll be voting against your own government that's delivering a withdrawal from the European Union that you're keen to withdraw from. Can you just talk us through why?
Well, first of all, it's not my government, it's Her Majesty's government, so let's try and get things accurate. The deal is a bad deal. The government has negotiated poorly and is spending £39 billion of taxpayers' money, or wishes to, without getting anything in return. It's not delivering the leave.
So what should they have done differently?
What should they have done differently?
Is there an echo?
They should not have accepted the sequencing that the European Union asked for in the first place.
So we're going back just over 2 years now.
Well, you asked what should have been done differently.
I'm just but not everybody listening is as informed as you are. So things started going wrong over 2 years ago.
Oh, at the beginning of the negotiations.
The very beginning
the
of the
strategy was wrong, and David Davis was overruled by the Prime Minister in this. He was very keen not to agree their sequencing.
And why would the EU have changed their position after we refused to accept it?
Well, because it's a negotiation. In a negotiation, both sides have to agree in the end, and they wanted...
Well, they have, and you're complaining.
Well, because it's an agreement that doesn't deliver on Brexit.
But it's a negotiation, and both sides have to agree in the end, and they have.
That's absolutely right, but they've agreed something that is not going to be accepted in Parliament.
So I'm asking you why you think they would have agreed to what you would have accepted 2.5 years ago.
Well, because the EU wants the 39 billion, and once we'd agreed to give that to them, there was very little reason for them to make further moves in negotiations.
If we leave with no deal, they don't get the 39 billion.
That's absolutely right, so we shouldn't worry about leaving with no deal.
Right. So can I ask again, why you think things have gone so wrong? We'll start with the sequencing. What happened that went wrong after that?
Well, I think the negotiating strategy has been poor, and I think we've got basically a Remainers Brexit, that we've got a Brexit that seeks to shadow membership of the European Union.
Brexit hasn't happened yet, as you reminded me a moment ago. So
yes,
let's re-examine your own words.
Talking about the withdrawal agreement,
yes,
it is a Remainers Brexit.
What does that mean?
It means that it's shadowing membership of the European Union. It's half in, half out. That it would tie us into the common external tariff. It would tie us in via Northern Ireland to the EU's rule book in vast swathes of activity.
And when people warned that the Good Friday Agreement would render that inevitable, why do you think they were dismissed?
Because it doesn't.
So regulatory alignment isn't in the Good Friday Agreement?
No, it isn't.
Okay. It is.
No, it isn't. It's not a matter of the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement wasn't considering those sorts of issues.
You don't think the Good Friday Agreement insists on regulatory alignment on both sides of the Irish border?
No, it doesn't. You're confusing two things, if I may say so.
Well, of course you may say so, but I think we're getting all a little bit distracted. We'll carry on. So, how would you have conducted negotiations in a more fruitful fashion, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Well, the EU about a year ago offered a Canada-style free trade deal, and I think that would have been worth paying £39 billion for.
And what would the difference be between that and what we're getting?
Well, the difference would be that we would not have the backstop, we would not have the superiority of EU law, and we would not be tied into potentially unending
Why would the Canada-style deal do away with the need for the backstop?
Because the issue around the backstop is essentially a phantom one. The EU, the UK,
that's
and
not
the
what
Irish
I asked. Why would the Canada deal, as specified by the European Union, why would that have done away with the need for the backstop?
Because if you'd had a comprehensive free trade agreement with no tariffs between the two sides, what would you have been trying to stop on the border?
Stuff coming in that doesn't have regulatory alignment with the European Union. No, but of course there's no regulatory alignment in the EU. How can you have trading standards without checking what's being traded?
You don't need to check what's being traded at the border.
So what do you mean by the phrase trading standards then?
Well, we have trading standards all the time.
And how do we check those standards without checking what's being traded?
But the issue of the hard border is checking at the border, not having no checks at all anywhere.
So in the event of a Canada-style trade deal, why would there be no need for the backstop, Jacob?
The backstop has always been a failure of British negotiations. Backstop at all, because nobody's going to implement a hard border.
That's not what I asked, though, is it? Why would the Canada trade deal have done away with the need for the backstop?
Because there's no need for a backstop anyway.
Oh, I see. So we don't need it now.
That's my view, yes. It's not, unfortunately, the government's view.
No, or the European unions, or the Irish governments, or the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, or every single politician involved in drawing it up. So what are they missing? What are they missing that you can see, Mr. Rees-Mogg?
What you have just said is simply not accurate. Lord Trimble, David Trimble, one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, won the Nobel Prize for it.
The DUP were opposed to the Good Friday Agreement.
Lord Trimble was not a member of the DUP. He was the leader of the Ulster Unionists and now sits as a Conservative peer in the House of Lords.
And why does he think there's no need for a backstop?
Well, you should invite him on to explain to you.
Because you're telling me. He's your example, so you tell me.
He said this publicly and has supported a Canada-style free trade deal without a backstop.
So explain his reasoning to me if you won't explain your own.
Well, I tried to explain my own, but you then went off on a wild goose chase about something that turned out to be wrong.
I apologise for that.
The explanation is very straightforward, that nobody is planning to introduce a hard border. And therefore the backstop is only there to prevent a hard border, which neither the EU nor the British are going to implement.
So what happens next?
What happens next? I imagine the Prime Minister will go back to the EU and say, this deal will not work, and we need to try something else.
And what do you think they will do?
Well, I think they're quite keen to get our £39 billion, and I think it would be sensible for the government to go back to the offer the EU made, as I said, nearly a year ago, on a comprehensive free trade agreement.
And if that doesn't happen?
That doesn't happen, we leave without a deal. We go to WTO terms.
What does WTO terms mean in the context of normal consumers buying food in the shops?
The price of food should come down because we can reduce tariffs on food, which are very high because of the EU's common external tariff that protects...
But you know this isn't true. You know there's absolutely nobody informed who thinks that following WTO guidelines would reduce the price of food in this country. Or I guess your fellow Leave campaigner Michael Gove is mistaken and wrong, or perhaps even dishonest.
There are lots of people who think that. It would be in the government's hands, that the government sets a schedule of tariffs at the WTO. It currently follows...
No, the government doesn't set a schedule of tariffs at the WTO. The government asks the WTO, and then every single country that's a member gets a vote on whether or not we're allowed to follow that schedule. And
no, that's simply not correct.
But it simply is correct.
No, it's not. Countries go to the WTO and set their schedule of tariffs.
And the WTO decides whether or not they can have it.
No, that's not...
So what tariffs do you envision the government setting?
That's not correct. That the tariffs then have to be equal amongst all countries, so that you have to treat all countries
including
alike.
European Union countries.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yes. Unless you have a specific trade agreement that overrides the most favoured nation status.
Like the ones we've got.
You're absolutely right. We do have some deals at the WTO, some which have already agreed to be rolled over once we've left, and others are
it hasn't
underway.
Been agreed. There's already, I think, 8 objections that have been lodged with the plan that we've cautiously put together. I tell you what I want, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Hold on, but you're saying that lodging objections does not stop your tariffs taking place, and what we could do is we could remove the tariffs, which go up to 80% on things like beef, so we could have cheaper food. So 20%
what has Michael Gove got wrong then when he says that the beef products will go up by 40%? Because I'm fascinated by the disputes between prominent Leave campaigners that have now transpired. So in your view, because you study these things very closely, what is Michael Gove, the Environment Secretary, missing, and the National Farmers Union, which have described what you're calling for as a catastrophe, do them the favour of explaining what it is you can see that they can't?
What Michael Gove is assuming in that context is that we apply the common external tariff of the European Union to goods coming into this country when we've left the European Union, and it'll be under our own control. The wiser thing to do...
No, he's not, though, is he? He's talking about a 40% higher tariff than we currently have. So what is it you can see that he can't?
You're not listening.
I am listening, Jacob. I'm just not falling for it.
No, what he is assuming is we apply the common external tariff once we've left the European Union.
So why haven't you explained his error to him?
Hold on. Do just wait a moment.
Of course I will.
Because that would be to EU products as well as non-EU products. But the alternative, instead of applying the common external tariff to all products, is to lower the tariff to all countries, which lessens the price of food. It's really very simple.
So where will we be getting our beef from?
Where will we be getting our beef from? We can get it from all around the world. We can get very good beef from Australia.
And what regulatory standards or trading standards will we be operating on?
Well, Australian beef is regulated to extremely high standards.
So we'll be signing up to the Australian regulatory body?
Well, we would recognise that beef produced in Australia is very good quality. I don't see any problem with that.
So we'll be signing up to Australian health and safety legislation?
No, all countries...
So who will be checking the quality of the beef that you're buying from the other side of the world?
Well, I'd be quite happy to buy beef that meets Australian standards.
So you would be signing up then? Aren't we surrendering sovereignty by meeting Australian standards, Jacob?
No, I don't think that's right.
Okay, so why are we surrendering sovereignty by meeting EU standards?
The issue there is meeting EU standards for our own production. We're not saying we're not saying that we would apply Australian standards to domestic production.
Oh, I see. So we'll be importing stuff from Australia that meets different standards from the stuff that we're growing here ourselves.
Why not? Are you saying Australian beef is dangerous?
I don't have a strong view about Australian beef, but I'm a bit of an expert on English cant. So the question again is, we'll have two separate regulatory standards for beef, will we, depending on where it came from? So who will be checking that? Who will be checking that Australian beef coming here from Australia meets Australian standards, Jacob?
The inspection of food already under the EU from New Zealand, for example, is done...
We're talking about New Zealand now. I'm asking about the Australian beef you're so keen to buy. Who will be checking?
I'm simply explaining to you...
you're simply explaining to me how Australian beef coming into this country will be checked. Who by and where?
I'm telling you how it's already done with New Zealand. It's checked in New Zealand by New Zealand inspectors because the standards in New Zealand are very high. The same applies to Australia. Australian standards are very high.
And these are in terms of a trade agreement?
You don't need to have a trade agreement. You can do it unilaterally.
Right. Do we do that with New Zealand?
New Zealand is done under the European Union that has the competence for trade.
So that's not a valid comparison then. So New Zealand has a trade agreement with the European Union, does it?
There's an agreement.
So we can't use New Zealand as an example. Australian food standards, because they're not the same as Australia. And I'm asking you about Australian beef. Who will check it?
What I'm saying to you is very straightforward.
Of course it is. Yes, that's why you're using New Zealand to make a point about Australia.
No, I'm just talking generally about terms of trade.
I'm not. I'm talking about the Australian beef that you're using as an explanation of your position.
What you're trying to do is the cheap barrister's trick of badgering the witness and not...
And you're going for an ad hominem instead of answering the questions.
Word in edgeways.
So back to the Australian beef.
Back to the Australian beef. Australia has very high standards. Beef coming from Australia will be inspected in the normal way as it is in Australia. We can, as a sovereign decision, say that we think beef from Australia is very good quality and we will therefore accept it into our country.
And who will check it?
It will have been checked in Australia before it's left. And
so who will check it here?
We will say we think that's good enough as our own decision.
Right.
And it's very high quality beef. Not that I've come on LBC to give an advert for Australian beef, but it is very good beef.
Okay, so we'll be getting our beef from Australia and it will meet Australian regulatory standards and
we might carry on getting beef from the Republic of Ireland that meets EU standards. It will still be perfectly safe beef to eat. We can trade with countries across the world.
We already do. You've just used New Zealand yourself as an example of what we do. So what will we be able to do afterwards that we can't do now?
Well, currently we have very high tariffs on Australian beef, so we'd be able to reduce those so that the cost of food in this country would be cheaper, which is where I started from.
Yes, and the meat products that the Australian industry have suggested for export to the UK are hormone treated, and you know that. Whereas we don't have hormone treated beef for sale in this country.
But if it is labelled, people can decide for themselves. I don't think you ought to tell people what sort of beef they'll eat. I've been to Australia and eaten Australian beef quite happily.
I'm sure you have, but why does the European Union regulation outlaw hormone-treated beef?
Oh, because it's protectionist and it wants us to pay higher prices.
So it's got nothing to do with hormones?
No, it's the EU is a protectionist racket.
So we can buy the EU is a protectionist racket.
It is. Yes, it protects inefficient European producers at the expense of British
so we'll
consumers.
be buying hormone-treated beef from Australia and we won't be checking it at our ports to make sure that it's okay, because Australia will have told us that it's okay.
Australia has I trust Australian standards just as much as I trust Irish standards.
Yes, but Ireland don't give hormones to their beef cattle.
Well, I'm not worried about that. I think that you
Can I ask what your qualifications are in the context of humans consuming hormone-treated beef?
Well, that it's perfectly safe in Australia, and the Australians don't have any ill effects from this.
Right. You've researched this, have you, Jacob?
That seems quite a good enough answer.
No, it doesn't. The research on what hormone-treated beef is believed to do to human beings is quite capacious. That's why they can sell it more cheap, because it makes the stuff grow in an unhealthy fashion.
I think you're just running along with a hobby horse, actually.
I think you're right, Jacob. Let's try again, if we may, because it's taken me a very long time to get you on the programme.
Well, you haven't invited me.
We've had an invitation in. Perhaps your people haven't passed it on to you. We've had an invitation. Now we're going down another. I'm very grateful.
I came on with you last during the Brexit debate.
Before the campaign, when I was being scrupulously impartial. So I'm
on LBC every fortnight with Mr. Ferrari. I'm a regular appearance on your station, and this is the first time I've been asked to come on with you for ages.
Well, that's not true, but let's chalk it up as perhaps the message not being passed along to you. So when the vote is lost tonight by the Prime Minister, and we go back to Brussels and ask them to do what they've said in very clear terms they're not prepared to do, what happens then?
Well, there's then a choice for the European Union, as much as there is for us, whether we leave with a different deal or whether we leave without one, because that's what the law provides for.
Sorry, say that again. The European Union get to decide what happens to us?
No, there is a choice for both of us.
Oh, so that's not what you said?
No, I said there's a choice for both of us.
Carry on.
Either we have a new deal, which both sides are then willing to accept, or we leave without a deal on the
So that's the option now. The European Union, if they're telling the truth when they say that we're not going to renegotiate anything, we leave without a deal.
But this is a negotiation, so when people say this is our bottom line, it very rarely is. But time will tell.
So how much time have we got?
We've got, 73 days?
Yes, and so you think in the next 73 days the European Union are going to change the negotiating position that has been more or less constant for the last 12 months?
In reality, I think it's more likely that we leave without an agreement and leave on WTO terms. Okay. So that goes back to what we were discussing before.
It does. So you're advocating for no deal. That's what you believe is the most likely outcome.
It's what one believes is most likely and what one is advocating for are not necessarily the same thing.
So what is one advocating for?
I would be in favour of a deal. But if that proves impossible, there is nothing to be fearful about leaving on WTO terms.
Okay, and all the people that say there's a lot to be fearful of, like the National Farmers Union and the Governor of the Bank of England and the CBI, you can see what they can't see, which is...
Well, the CBI's got everything wrong in its history. It wanted us to join the euro, wanted us to join the exchange rate mechanism.
I think that's what you just called a red herring or something, isn't it? So the question is, what can you see that they can't see?
What I would say is that you should judge people by their previous track record.
Well, I am. Why haven't you taken down that tweet from The Sun about what tariffs really means? Because The Sun withdrew it and it's still on your Twitter account, so I'm judging you by your track record.
Right. Judge away. The Governor of the Bank of England said we'd have a technical recession. Thank you so much. Fortunately, you're not a part of the judiciary. The Governor of the Bank of England said we would have a technical recession purely on a vote to leave.
The question is, what can you see that they can't see? And you know that the Governor, I mean, this is so disingenuous. The Governor of the Bank of England dedicated himself on the morning after the vote to making his own predictions not come true. But you know this. You just know that if you say it in a plausible and persuasive fashion, people will continue to believe you, despite the fact that you've led them to the precipice of a no-deal Brexit, which even you know deep down will be disastrous. Unless you can answer this question. What is it you can see that they can't?
You're trying to get up to the adverts with an hysterical diatribe. I think
it's all right. We can postpone the adverts. What can you see that all of the people who warn against coming out with no deal can't see?
I can see what they've got wrong before and why.
I'm not asking about the past. I'm asking about the future. What can you see that they can't see?
The past is a very useful guide to the future because you can see why people are making the judgments. The CBI protects incumbent interests, and therefore it always goes for things that are not for the consumer interest but the producer interest.
Yes, okay.
The Governor of the Bank of England is a deeply politicised figure who has been anti-Brexit from the moment it was proposed. What can I see? I can see the opportunities of cheaper food, clothing and footwear, helping most of all the incomes of the least well-off in our society.
Absolutely nobody agrees with you.
We can cut tariffs, we can reduce costs to people.
Absolutely nobody agrees with you.
Even the Sun
newspaper withdrew these claims.
It's wonderfully exciting. It's a great opportunity. It is freedom for the British people. It is no longer shackled to the failed economic model of the European Union, which which has the euro and high unemployment, and even Germany going into recession. It is a wonderful opportunity for our nation. You should rejoice and be proud at what our country can do.
I was hoping to have reasons for rejoicing at the end of this conversation, so I'll ask you one final time. The economic modelling that you rely upon has been discredited so badly that even the Sun withdrew it. Why do you persist?
That's not true. The advice I take is from economists for free trade and Patrick Minford, who has the best track record of almost any forecaster you can find in this country, and that cutting tariffs does cut prices. That's unquestionably true.
Patrick Minford, let me just write that down. Patrick Minford has the best reputation for economic forecasting.
He got the exchange rate mechanism right, he got the euro right. His record in this field
Gordon Brown got the euro right. So Jacob Rees-Mogg is the gentleman that said for Brexit to succeed, agriculture and industry will be decimated in this country.
Won't be decimated
but he said that, and he's the man you're citing.
That actually it will be an opportunity for us to be more competitive.
No, we need to be clear. He's the man you're citing, and those are his words.
You're taking one very selective quotation from him. He's actually saying that it's a real economic opportunity.
Did he or did he not say that?
And we'll get fast
Did he or did he not say that manufacturing industry and agriculture would be more or less destroyed?
You've got to put what he said in the full context of the economic growth that we will
Did he or did he not say that agriculture and industry would be destroyed?
I think, as I refer you to the answer I've just given,
well, I'd like a yes or a no. Did he or did he not say it?
You might like all sorts of things, but
did he or did he not say it?
You're quoting extraordinarily selectively from somebody who has forecast.
So he said it.
He has forecast correctly on the exchange rate mechanism, on the euro, and the opportunities that come from cutting the barriers to trade, which have worked in every country.
Your favourite economic forecaster explained that agriculture and industry would be destroyed by Brexit.
You're completely exaggerating a comment that he made.
So he did say it. So he did say it.
What you're saying is inaccurate. You're trying to spin something. He points to it is indeed, yes, it's your reputation.
Absolutely.
But it's a fine one, and it makes good listening.
Yes, so you're not going to answer the question.
I've answered many of your questions.
You have, but here's the last one. Did Patrick Minford, your economic forecaster of choice...
I've already answered that one. I've told you you're doing the classic thing of taking something selectively and out of context to make a wrong point.
Okay, so did he say it or not?
I've just answered your question. I refer you to what I said a moment ago.
Well, just remind my listeners, did he say it or not?
They were paying more attention than you.
I heard you say that he'd been quoted, which would suggest he did say it, but you haven't answered my question except obliquely. So the man that you cite as an economic forecaster to be trusted...
You're so classically inaccurate. I've answered your question merely not in the way
I'm very grateful for your time.
You wanted me to.
Well, no, I asked a question that admits a yes or no answer, and you haven't provided a yes or no answer, so we can at least end on a tone of agreement. You didn't answer the question in the way that I wanted to, and we both know why.